Hello everyone, welcome to this session where we are discussing the fifth lecture or fifth session of this particular module, that is abuse of dominant position. And in this particular session we will discuss the abuse of dominance position because what we have already discussed under this particular module is the competition law focuses on regulation of the abuse of dominant position, and the dominancy means the dominancy in a relevant market. In previous sessions we have already discussed the meaning of relevant market and the meaning of dominant position. So we are here to discuss the abuse means, what is the meaning of abuse or how the dominant position can abuse its position. So with this going into the detail, just if you remember the previous lecture under which we have already discussed the abuse of dominance is prohibited. Section 4 is about abuse of dominance is prohibited if a dominant position or the enterprise of the dominant enterprise abuse its position in relevant market. How means thereby only the dominance position is not important. However, holding a dominant position itself is not illegal. It's abuse of the position that attract scrutiny. Section 19 subclass 4 of the Act provides a list factor that our Competition Commission of India considered while determining whether an enterprise enjoy a dominant position in a relevant market or not. We have already discussed that the dominance position means a position by its strength what an enterprise enjoyed in a particular relevant market. That means the important thing is to determination of the strength of enterprise and what are the factors which have to taken into account for the purpose of assessment of whether an enterprise is enjoying its strength or not, and the factors are like what are given under section 19 subclass 4 what we have already discussed, like the market share, size and resources, economic power, social position, and the entrant barrier to entrant. There are so many other factors. That means one factor solely not responsible. No doubt there are certain key factor which is that means which is a guiding factor, which is the important factor to the consider, which is a guiding, like the you may say, but that is not a conclusive whether we are discussing about the market share. But definitely market share is not a sole factor, what we have already discussed with the case in NSC and the case of Bharat Sanchar Nigam Limited. So in last lecture what we have established, the market position, it is established. What is the dominance position? We have established, but the problem is mere dominancy or position of dominancy is the relevant factor is not important. This is important to get into such a step to find out the result. The one factor is establishment of dominant factor, we have concluded. The second factor is whether the enterprise comes within the meaning of enterprise. Yes. Whether that enterprise is dominant position and the dominancy must be established in relevant market. Up to this we have already concluded. So in today's lecture or today's session, what is dealing with the abuse of dominant position. What is abuse? How you can say the dominant position is abusing its strength? For this purpose, you have to come with the meaning of abuse. What is the meaning of abuse is an important aspect. Then we will discuss the abusive conduct or abusive practicing. So before going into detail of the practices or conducting or what are the activities which may presume as the abuse, just look the meaning or the key concept of abuse in this session. Once the dominance of an enterprise is established, the next step is to examine the conduct of dominant enterprise and to see whether that falls under the category of abuse mentioned under the Act. Competition law prohibits firm from engaging in anti-competitive behavior that harm consumers or competitors. There are two key concepts or two key positions in the competition law that are exploitative and exclusively behavior. The exploitative and exclusionary behavior are the key concept in competition law, often addressed under framework like antitrust regulation in the United States. The EU competition law, that is if you see the EU competition law, particularly the article 101 and 102 are similar regimes which are globally. The behaviors typically involve the dominant firm leveraging their market power to distort competition, harm consumer or stifle rivals. So, an abuse of dominant position may be generally categorized into the exploitative behavior and exclusivity behavior. The exclusivity behavior means an upstream dominant enterprise supplies the input to its downstream affiliate at lower cost than its downstream rival, leading to price squeeze, causing a competitive disadvantage to the downstream rival, and like the input cost charged to the downstream affiliate to the ₹100, the downstream rival it to ₹130. So there is an inherent competitive disadvantage of ₹30 to the rival firm, and there are two. Second term is exploitative abuse. What is exploitative abuse? Is where dominant player charges excessive price from the consumer or exploit due to its dominance. If you see the meaning of exclusionary behavior, just take the example or the concept what is exclusionary behavior is. Exclusionary behavior refer to a conduct by dominant firm that exclude or forecloses the competitors from the market, often by making it difficult to impossible for them to compete. Example of exclusionary behavior include, and which include like predatory pricing, exclusive dealing, refusal to supply and margin squeeze. What is predatory pricing? Predatory pricing we will discuss in later stage what is predatory pricing, but just for the example, for the sake of example, what we are dealing with the meaning of exclusivity behavior. Exclusionary behavior, that means which is likely to exclude the other competitor, and predatory pricing is a tool or using as a strategy like where a dominant firm sets price below cost to drive competitor out of business. There is another aspect of the exclusionary behavior is exclusive dealing, where a dominant firm require customer or supplier to deal only with them, excluding competitor from the market, that is like exclusive dealing. And sometimes refusal to supply may be is conduct like the exclusionary behavior, where a dominant firm refuses to supply essential input or service to a competitor, hindering their ability to compete. And margin squeeze is one of the more important exclusivity behavior or conduct, where a dominant firm sets price for its product or services in the way that squeezes the margin of the competitors and making it difficult for them to compete. So this is like the behavior which comes under the meaning of exclusivity behavior. And what is exploitative behavior? With the name it is self-explanatory, where a dominant firm using its or taking advantage of its advantageous position or the dominant position by the exploitation of the other customer or consumer or the competitor. And exploitative behavior refers to a conduct by the dominant firm that exploit its market power to extract benefit from customer or supplier, often at the expense of competition and consumer welfare. There are some examples you may take for the purpose of the general understanding. What are the exploitative behavior? And actually it includes the excessive pricing, unfair trading condition and the hold up. What is excessive pricing? Excessive pricing means we will see is detail, I have already told you, but for the purpose of general understanding here, the excessive pricing is a strategy of exploitative behavior where a dominant firm charges price that are significantly higher than what would be expected in a competitive market. The second is unfair trading conditions. A dominant firm imposes unfair trading condition on customer or supplier such as discriminatory prices or unjustified restriction. And hold up means where a dominant firm takes advantage of its market power to extract concession or benefits from customers or supplier. So these are only the strategies. These are the only strategy is not important. There can be so many other strategy, but the important point which you have to focus is the behavior is like the exploitation, where a dominant firm or the advantageous firm is basically the exploit the customer or the supplier, that means the competitor in the market, the expense of the competition. That means for that purpose, this is idea which actually the prohibit or which restrict or which that means you can say which is not under the means the important object of the Competition Act. That means this actually dilute the Competitions Act main objective. That's why these type of exploitative behavior are strictly prohibited by the dominant position if he take advantages or taking such type of activities. CCI is here to taking this, that means to check or investigate in this matter. So the important point is whether it is exploitative behavior or exclusivity behavior, both comes within the meaning of the abuse under this act. And if you see the legal context under the United States or the European Union, see the legal context like what is the competition law, what is under the competition law of United States. If you see particularly the section 2 of the United States, which is under the Sherman Act, we have already discussed the target monopolization, which requiring a proof of market power and anti-competitive conduct. Exclusionary acts are more commonly prosecuted than exploitative ones, as US law focuses on protecting competition, not competitors or consumers directly. And likewise in European Union, if you see the Article 102 of this particular European Union's provisions, which prohibits the abuse of dominant position, covering both exploitative behavior and exclusionary behavior. And the European Union is strict on the exploitation, that is like in the case of excessive pricing, cases like the United Brand in 1972 if you see. However, the Competition Act in India does not make such distinction. There is no such distinction. There is no term what the Competition Act has been used like the exploitative or exclusionary. There are something like the mixed approach. If you see, it is started from the recommendation of Raghavan Committee. When Raghavan Committee recommended or made the recommendation about the abuse, the concept of abuse is basically the objective concept what is actually held in Hoffman-La Roche case. The concept of abuse is an objective concept relating to the behavior of an undertaking in a dominant position, which is such as to influence the structure of a market where as a result of very presence of the undertaking in question, the degree of competition is weakened and which though resources to methods different from those which conditions normal competition is product or service on the basis of transaction in commercial operators has the effect, the hindering the maintenance of the degree of competition is still existing in the market or the growth of that competition. This is the observation of the judiciary in Hoffman-La Roche case, and which is focuses about the objective, and the Raghavan Committee recommended for the purpose of the abusive concept under this act and proposed. So under the Indian Act, what is the abuse of dominance? If you see, the concept is like dominance is not considered per se bad, but it's abuse. Abuse is stated occur when an enterprise or group of enterprise uses its dominant position in relevant market in an exclusionary or exploitative manner. And the Act gives an exhaustive list of practice that shall constitute the abuse of dominant position and therefore are prohibited. Such practices shall constitute abuse only when adopted by the enterprise enjoying the dominant position in the relevant market in India. And abuse of dominance is judged in the term of the specific type of act committed by the dominant enterprise. Such act are prohibited under the law. And any abuse of the type specified in the act by the dominant firm shall be stand prohibited. Particularly, section 4 subclause 2 of the act specify such practices by the dominant enterprise or groups of enterprise and abuse. If you see the list, like directly or indirectly imposing unfair or discriminatory condition in purchase of sale of goods or service. That means the discriminatory conditions, you can say. Directly or indirectly imposing unfair and discriminatory price in the purchase of sale, which include obviously the predatory pricing or excessive pricing. The conduct which is like to limiting the restricting the production of goods, provision of service, limiting or restricting the technical or scientific development relating to goods or service to prejudice the consumer, denying the market access in any manner, making conclusion of contract subject to the acceptance of by the other parties of the supplementary obligations, which by their nature or according to the commercial use have no connection with the subject such contract, and using its dominant position in one relevant market to other to protect other relevant market. You can see general the taking advantage leveraging. So, to prove or to analyze the position of the dominant enterprise, whether they are acting or participating in any activity which may comes within the meaning of abusive or conduct or not, the exploitative behavior or exclusionary behavior is not important, because these are no distinction, there are no certain type of distinction given under this act. But what is given under this act, it is a exclusive or the, you can say, the exhaustive list, and this list includes the mixed approach which involve certain type of exploitative behavior and certain type of exclusively behavior. So, with this list from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, CCI can analyze the behavior or conduct or practicing adopted by or indulged by the enterprise which is in dominant position in relevant market. If it comes under or falls within this type of activities, that means that enterprise is taking advantage of its advantageous position in relevant market by involving in such type of activities which may be abusive in nature and that are prohibited under section 4. Section 4 subclause 2, that share shall be a dominant position. If you see whatever stated in this act, this is basically the copied from the actual where, and however the word shall does not impose a mandatory condition. If you see, even though an enterprise imposes unfair or discriminatory condition, it shall not per se consider abuse of dominant position. And the explanation of this section, if you see, the point is, it point out that if unfair or discriminatory condition is imposed to meeting competition, then act shall not be considered as abuse of dominance. The explanation further clarify that every unfair or discriminatory condition shall be not considered an abuse of dominance. It has to have some relation with the competition prevalent in Indian market. Just see a case, that is Google's abuse of dominant position in Indian online search market. For the purpose of general understanding, what CCI analyze in this case, having look at the background, actually Google is a multinational technology company that provides a range of online services including search, advertising and cloud computing. And India, Google is leading online search engine with a market share of over 95%. And the allegations were, in 2018, Competition Commission of India received a complaint from Indian company alleging that Google had abused its dominance position in online search market in India. And the complaint alleged that Google had engaged in following anti-competitive practices like self-preferencing, manipulation of search result, exclusive agreement, and in such cases when CCI received the complaint and investigate the matter, what CCI found in its investigation that the allegation and found that allegation had indeed abused its dominant position in online search market in India. And CCI analyzed like the deciding its the position by analyzing its self-dominance. Google held a dominant position in online search market with a market share of 95%. Self-preferencing, in the case of allegation of self-preferencing, what CCI found that Google search algorithm did indeed favor its own services over the other competitor. And the CCI found Google manipulated its search result in favor of own services, and Google entered into the exclusive agreement with the device manufacturer and telecom operator to pre-install it as a search engine is other device. And on the basis of these parameter and analysis, what CCI found that it was in dominant position. The evidence shows that there are certain effects, and effects are foreclosure of competition. This Google action foreclosed the competition in online search market and making it difficult to the player to enter to expand their presence. It reduced the customer choice. Google's action of this type of practicing reduced the customer choice as users were limited to the using Google services rather than others' competitor, and it is harm to the competitor. What CCI found that this Google action harmed its competitor, including the reading their visibility and traffic. That's why CCI imposed a penalty of rupees 136 crore on Google for abusing its dominant position in online search market in India and directed Google to cease its indices and modify its business practice. So with this case, what we have taken with this session, that abuse is a concept which is based on certain specific practice, and the practices as a list in exhaustive practice list is given under this act, and on such behavior practices which is categorized basically in exploitative behavior and exclusionary behavior having the mixed approach, CCI make them into the decision or the establishment of the abuse indulged practices adopted by any enterprises having its dominant position in relevant market. So with this, in next session we will discuss what are the determining factor of abusing conduct under this act. So for today, for this session, thank you very much.